but again, in the current environment, with the way things stand, just guessing, you would think that they're going to explore the sale of the full franchise. His presence is not welcome amongst his fellow 31 owners.
It's been very difficult to be a Washington Commanders fan over the past decade, 2 decades, ever since Dan Snyder purchased the team. And now it looks like there's a glimmer of hope and a light at the end of the tunnel for all of you guys. Where is there? So before we get to the content, I got some pretty awesome news on my Twitter page, man. I don't want to make a spectacle of it on my YouTube channel, so make sure you follow me on Twitter if you want to see it. It's something we could all get behind, and it's a huge reason why I'm not wearing a beanie in today's video. On top of that, we announced a $100 giveaway winner at the end of each and every week to a subscriber that turns on our notifications on this channel. Now that we got all that out of the way, work! Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Look, I understand I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan, but you have to admit, each and every single time I appeared on this channel, I have given unbiased analysis on each and every NFC East team. For example, I have said repeatedly that the Eagles are the favorite to win the division even before the season started, and they've been doing a tremendously better job at roster construction than any other NFC East team. I applauded the New York Giants for opting to hire Brian Dable to attempt to further develop Daniel Jones as opposed to trying to hire Brian Flores and Deshaun Watson, which was a rumor that we heard over this past offseason. I mean, at least for like a week or two. And I think the Washington Commanders are significantly better than what their record suggests. And even at that, I think their record is a miracle. I think Ron Rivera is the type of coach that you want in this type of situation for the Washington Commanders, as you are trying to finally be one of the best teams in the NFC East. But obviously this team consistently falls short. Over the past 2 years, I would primarily say the biggest issue that the Commanders have had is quarterback play. I would argue for the past majority of the decade, ever since Kirk Cousins left, the primary issue the Washington Commanders have always had was quarterback play. But I think in addition to that, probably the biggest issue that they have had recently, I mean, at least a little bit over the past 2 decades, is the fact that they have Dan Snyder as an owner, which is what kind of shocks me. I don't really understand how new Washington Commanders fans are formed when you have Dan Snyder as an owner, because the Washington Commanders have been a consistent laughingstock, whether it's from doing absolutely disgusting stuff with cheerleaders and exploiting them, which a report over a year ago came out explaining that, all the way to literally zip tying the fencing in FedEx Field, which resulted in fans falling over Jalen Hurts last year. And that's before I even talk about the sewage pipes bursting and literal poop water being dumped all over FedEx Field. I mean, look, I understand that the Dallas Cowboys more often than not usually stink, at least in the latter part of the season. We usually start out the season great, but the one thing I could say, even though the Jones family at times demonstrates tremendous ineptitude, like trading Amari Cooper for a 5th round pick, I could at least get behind the fact that I believe this is a family that's very passionate about their team. And even though I don't think winning Super Bowls are at the forefront of their minds, I think getting into the media headlines are, I could at least see this family's passion for their team. For the Washington Commanders, I don't know if I could say the same thing about Dan and Tanya Snyder. I mean, I see moments where they make good decisions, like, again, hiring Ron Rivera was a good decision. Trying to give up way too many draft picks for Robert Griffin III is just an indication of them doing whatever they can to finally answer their quarterback problem. And for the most part, at least now, you can make an argument that this is a team that has an identity. Their current quarterback, Taylor Heineke, is a guy that I am even rooting for, even though he's in my division. That's a guy I could get behind, even though originally their starter was Carson Wentz. And it looks like things might be getting a little bit better if you're a Washington Commanders fan. So if you remember, a couple weeks ago, Dan Snyder dominated the headlines because apparently he claimed that he had dirt on NFL owners and Roger Goodell. This was the latest in Dan Snyder's shenanigans. I mean, if refusing to testify in front of Congress when he was subpoenaed wasn't wild, if hiding on a yacht and having a Twitter account literally pinpoint his location so he didn't have to appear at court wasn't wild, claiming that you have dirt on every single owner in the NFL is probably the latest thing that Dan Snyder did that just is very head scratching. Because you have to understand, NFL owners are your business partners. There's revenue sharing involved. And Dan Snyder has benefited from this tremendously, but he still has cooked the books in the past, so he didn't have to give up as much of a split to the rest of ownership. That's the type of scumbag that Dan Snyder is. And this is the latest in his scumbaggery. He claimed that no one in the NFL can fuck with him, that the NFL is a mafia and all the owners hate each other. And of course, one veteran owner said that's not true, all the owners hate Dan. And I think after a while we found out who that owner was, because a few short days after, when he was asked about the situation, Indianapolis Colts owner Jim Irsay stated, "I just believe in the workplace today, the standard that the Shield stands for in the NFL, you have to protect that. I just think that once the owners start talking amongst each other, they'll arrive to the right decision. My belief is that, unfortunately, that's the road we probably have to go down, and we just need to finish the investigation. But it's gravely concerning to me the things that have occurred over there over the last 20 years. We have to look at the evidence, and we have to be thorough going forward. But I think removal as the owner is something that has to be given serious consideration. I believe it's in the best interest of the National Football League that we look squarely in the eye and deal with it." While the Commanders responded to this with a statement saying, "It's unfortunate that Mr. Irsay continues to behave in a way that clearly is a violation of the Constitution of the NFL, which stipulates that no club member can publicly criticize another organization or its management. We look forward to playing his team that Sunday." Irsay also told the Washington Post that, "I only run into owners if it's really coincidental. Most of us don't see each other unless we happen to be passing each other on the field or somewhere at the same time. It has nothing to do with Dan Snyder, but if I was playing the Ravens, I wouldn't know if Steve Biscotti was going." So that was the response he had to Dan Snyder's initial claim that he has dirt on the rest of the owners. But the Commander's statement also closed off by saying that Irsay's comments were inappropriate but not surprising, and also pointed to their progress as an organization over the past 2 years. Now, here's the important part. The statement concludes with saying, "Mr. Irsay will conclude that there is no reason for the Snyders to consider selling the franchise, and they won't." Well, that's where things get a little interesting, because the latest information we have on the situation is, for some reason, it appears as though Dan Snyder has hired Bank of America to sell the Washington Commanders. Now, this is significant because before we just heard Dan Snyder saying there is no way, shape, or form that I am ever selling this team, which I have no idea why he's holding on to his team. I mean, obviously it's a remarkable investment, but man, he's a horrible owner. Now, Rap Sheet did a little bit more digging in here, and when he was asked, is Dan Snyder considering a sale of the entire franchise or just a piece, a spokesperson told him that we are exploring all options at this time. So there's a chance that he is still going to be the majority owner. Now, the Washington Commanders put out an official statement saying that Dan and Tanya Snyder and the Washington Commanders announced today that they have hired Bank of America Securities to consider potential transactions. The Snyders remain committed to the team, all of its employees, and its countless fans, to putting the best product on the field and continuing the work to set the gold standard for workplaces in the NFL. If you're a Commanders fan, I'm going to be honest, you might not want to get your hopes up here, because historically you heard Dan Snyder be hell-bent on keeping the team, but this is something that you could be a little optimistic about, at least a little bit hopeful for. There is a chance he sells the entire team. Maybe he's being squeezed behind the scenes by the rest of ownership. Maybe they've arrived at a conclusion that there's just way too much strange stuff coming from the Snyder camp over the past 2 decades to the point where they just consider him to be a liability and that he should sell the team. So let me know in the comment section down below, especially if you're a Washington Commanders fan. What do you guys think about all this? Do you think he's going to sell the team, or do you think he's going to keep the team? Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.